9 things I wish I knew when I started TEFL. Teaching English as a foreign language was one of the best things I've done, but I made a lot of mistakes and learned a lot of painful lessons. So I'm going to go through some of those now today, and hopefully that's nice and useful for you. So the first one is low salary. When I first went into TEFL, my expectation was that the salary was going to be really, really low. Okay, I went online and I saw what people were offering, for example, for online lessons, and I found all these people offering online lessons for 1 hour for something like $5 US. And from there I knew, I just got it in my head that teaching English as a foreign language was some kind of like low salary activity. It was something that always was going to pay really low. And that was actually a total misconception. That's not true. Now, when you begin and once you go into some entry-level positions, sure, you might be in that £18 to £22 range for how much you're getting paid per hour. But what I've seen over the years of being involved in TEFL is how quickly that can rise. And really, people need to change their mindset to realize that there's a lot of people out there who will pay a lot more than that standard, than that low standard for a 1 hour lesson, okay? Not to mention, so that's with one-to-ones. You know, for example, now I've got one-to-ones that I do that are £75 per hour. I've heard of people doing one-to-ones that are over £100 per hour. So that perception of teaching English as a foreign language, low salary, low hourly rate, that's not necessarily true. And I think it's important to go into it knowing that, okay? Sometimes you need to know your worth. When I first started doing the one-to-ones in and around Barcelona, I was charging 20 euros. And what would happen is I'd get these clients and I would teach them. Sometimes they'd arrive 10 minutes late. I would stay 10 minutes after, 15 minutes after, giving them the best lesson possible. And then at the end of the session, actually, sorry, no, it wasn't 20. I used to charge 18 euros in Barcelona, in a city centre. 18 euros. They would arrive 10 minutes late. I'd stay 15 minutes early. I'd deliver 1 hour of just an excellent English lesson to them. I'd help them with something important. These are adults. And when it came to payment, they would literally, they would give me 20 and ask for 2 back. I mean, not all of them, but a fair few of them. And what I realized is these were, unfortunately, these were quite cheap clients, okay? And when you first go into TEFL, there's quite a lot of cheap clients. And now that's why once I increased my price from there, I went from there to charging something like 35 euros an hour. And all of a sudden, everyone started paying exactly what I was asking for. They would pay more, they would give me 40, things like this. So it was just unbelievable, the difference in clientele when I had my expectations really low and when I started to raise them. And now that, you know, I'm charging, I don't know what it is in conversion, let's say 85 euros per hour, again, there are just no questions. They just pay the right amount. So low salary doesn't have to be. Initial TEFL positions, perhaps you will get something quite on the lower side, but it doesn't mean that can't change after a period of time. Not to mention, you've got the international schools who pay a much better salary. You know, that's how you can make TEFL an actual career. TEFL doesn't have to be this just like like a short-term, low salary, do it for a couple of years, then go find a real career. There are real careers within TEFL. I mean, there's like 1.5 billion people around the world learning English. So there's a lot of money there, okay? There's a lot of money there. And it's certainly possible to carve out a piece of that and find yourself in quite a nice career, okay? So that's the first one, low salary expectations. It's not necessarily true that you're always on that low salary. Number 2, let's go for number 2, grammar experts. Okay. When I first got into TEFL, I remember thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to teach English, but I don't know a single thing about English grammar. And I mean that. I knew absolutely nothing. I even remember back in the days of university, I had this like entrance test where I had to prove my English, okay? And this was like to get into a university in London. And they had this computer that analysed all my grammar mistakes. And they handed me back this sheet. And all I could see on the sheet was just red, 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 red. It was so embarrassing. I failed. My grammar was really off. My grammar was bad. My spelling was bad. All these kind of things. And then I did improve. But a few years later, and I'm looking at becoming an English teacher. So don't I need to know everything about grammar if I want to be an English teacher? And that's just a huge misconception. You do not need to know everything about grammar in order to become an English teacher. What you do need to know, which is really important, is you need to know all of the grammar that's on your lesson plan. So if you're teaching some students and you're teaching them a new grammar point, all you need to know is you need to be confident in that grammar point. What was the, is it Frank Nightingale? The Leonardo DiCaprio film, Catch Me If You Can, where he says, he was a lecturer at a school, and they said, how did you do this? He said, well, I realized I didn't need to know everything about psychology. I just needed to be one lecture ahead of all my students. And that's not exactly the same for TEFL, but there is some truth in that. You just need to be really, really comfortable on the grammar that's in your actual lesson plan. You don't need to know the whole world of grammar. To this day, I'm 8 or 9 years deep into TEFL, and I'm still learning things about grammar today, okay? So that's grammar. You don't need to be a grammar expert. Phew, thank God, because I was so bad at this when I started, so bad. But yeah, I should say though, however, grammar is very important, okay? It's really important. Don't think that this is a topic you should avoid. You should actually try and learn this. I think it's a really important skill to learn, and it makes you a really good teacher as well. So embrace grammar, tackle grammar, but just do it like one part at a time. You don't need to know everything before you become a teacher, which is great for us. The next one, we've got teenagers. Why do I put teenagers? Well, before I started TEFL, I had this weird idea that I would only be teaching adults. I'd just be walking around a city and I'd be teaching these wonderful professionals. I'd be teaching the doctors, the teachers, the this, the that, the everyone, okay? But this is not the case, okay? When you go into TEFL, there's an extremely high chance that the people that you're going to be teaching are teenagers, okay? I would go as far and say that teenagers, in the work that I've done over the past decade or so, has been probably at around 80%. I've probably taught 80% teenagers. Now that ranges all the way from 13-year-olds, but then also a lot of 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds, just students, okay? And the teenager demographic, it's just so likely that you'll be teaching these guys. So you need to get quite comfortable with that. And we need to realize that when we teach teenagers, there's other factors at play, such as classroom management. So when you teach adults, you don't need to worry so much about them being just actively rude. Usually if an adult doesn't like a lesson or something like that, they'll just be kind of quiet about it. But teenagers, they can be a bit unruly, they can be a bit difficult to manage. So it's just really important to know that before you go into TEFL, just recognize you are going to be dealing with people who are in that 13 to 19-year-old bracket quite a lot. What I will say though is it's not all negatives. Sure, teenagers can be a little bit brash sometimes, they can be a bit annoying sometimes, but one thing I'll say about them is that usually they're not paying for those lessons directly. So there's that little bit of pressure that's off. When you're teaching a teenage class, there's a little bit of pressure off because they're not thinking, oh, I've paid £30 for this lesson and it's too easy for me or something like this. So there's a little less pressure there. I will also say I personally really like teenagers because they're at that age where you can actually have a proper conversation with them. I feel like I can express my personality with them, but there's just an extra dynamic involved with teaching teenagers where you really need to know how to actually manage a classroom, how to manage a situation. And I will say that most kind of, for example, CELTA courses, I think they really, really neglect the fact that you'll be teaching teenagers most of the time and all the extra stuff that comes with that. So it's really important to know that if you're doing one of those courses, they're not going to prepare you for teaching teenagers, okay? And I really think they should. So teenagers, I love teaching them. They're actually my favorite people to teach. I find them really interesting and some great characters in this area. But it's different and it's going to happen. You're going to teach teenagers. Most likely, if you go to a language academy, you're going to teach teenagers, get this, after they've already had their school day. Okay, so just bear that in mind. So they're going to go to school all day, and then their parents have sent them to a language academy, and then they're sat in front of you for an hour and a half. So just bear that in mind. These are the people that we're likely to teach. They can be lucrative though, okay? It can be good for one-to-ones, and the reason being, teenagers, what do they take? They take exams. And exams are something that people really like to pay for. So if you can get comfortable with that, you can get comfortable with the exams they take, it's just a really fantastic, it can really make your career. And for me, it has done that. So teenagers, you're going to teach them. Okay, let's move on. Number 4, the baptism of fire. I didn't even want to write what the baptism of fire is, okay? But it is this. When you're a new teacher and you first go to a foreign country and you go to a language academy, a lot of their students will be teenagers. So, a few of them will be adults. They'll have adult classes. But then they have this other type of class. Oh no, okay? And I had to go through this baptism of fire myself. And this class is young children. Oh my gosh. I feel like I'm getting PTSD just thinking about it. The nightmares I had initially with this. So young children, what am I talking about? We're talking as young as 3 years old to something like 9 years old, 10 years old, okay? So these are like primary school students, for those that are listening from the UK. These are like primary school, elementary school students. And there's a good chance that when you first get your first entry-level job into a language school or something like this, they're going to say to you, all right, perfect, we've got this class for you, this class, teenager, but if you want a job, you're going to need to take this class or these 4 hours a week. And the 4 hours a week will be what? There'll be young children classes. So when I first started, I took 2 hours a week I had with a group of 4-year-olds, and 2 hours a week I had with a group of 8-year-olds. And I'll be honest, when I started initially, this was like hell on earth. It stressed me out so much. I wasn't used to dealing with young people. I've not got that natural chemistry with the younger children either. I much prefer talking and speaking with the teenagers. I felt like I could relate to them, but I couldn't do that with the younger children. And it caused me a lot of headaches, okay? But it's really important to know that when you go into entry-level jobs, they're going to use, like, you getting the job there, they're going to use, like, you will give you the job, but you need to have this class, and it's like young children. Now, some of you watching this might think, that's great, that's fine, no problem, I love working with young children. Some of you will be a bit more like me, where that kind of idea just repulses you, and you want nothing to do with it. What I will say, though, to give you a little bit of hope on this baptism of fire, is after I got over the initial thing of I couldn't basically deal with the children, okay, I couldn't control them, my classroom management was really bad with them. Once I started to figure out the process of teaching these younger children, it actually became my easiest class of the week. Because you know how I said, like, teenagers, there's a little less pressure than with adults? Well, when you're teaching 4-year-olds, the pressure and expectation of those classes like drops to the floor. So once you know how to kind of control that class to a decent level, what you'll find is that you walk in there and it's like an hour and it's quite easy. Yeah. And so what went from being my worst class of the year when I first started teaching actually went on to be my easiest, most comfortable, like, okay, I've got this for an hour kind of class, okay? So there's that. When you start TEFL, you're likely in an entry-level job, you're going to have to go through this baptism of fire. Next up, we've got red tape. So I'm from the UK, and the rules around working 2 jobs, for example, they're not too strict in comparison to other European countries. Other countries, however, if you get 2 jobs, okay, 2 different jobs, the tax implications are nasty, okay? And I moved to Spain, and basically, you know what, let me just come back a little bit. When you go into TEFL, oftentimes you might be offered like what might seem like quite a small amount of hours. Let's say you go into one language academy and they say, all right, we're going to give you 14 hours. And you're thinking, well, I can probably work 20 to 25 teaching hours, okay? So they offer you 14 hours and you take it and you say, great, perfect, I've got 14 teaching hours, that's enough for me to live and work in Spain, sure, but what if I want to earn a bit more money, okay? Then you see a different language academy and they're offering you, they say, we'll take you for 6 hours. Okay, we'll take you for 6 hours a week. There we go, perfect. I've got my 20 hours. Yay, I'm living the good life. Okay, I'm working lots, making a bit more money, and I'm doing it with 2 schools. Well, this was my mistake, and people that I knew of, they had this 14-hour job. Then they accepted another job from a language academy with less hours. And then they got like this hidden tax bill they wasn't expecting at the end of the year. And, you know, it's one of those, the worst thing you can ever receive, I'm sure, is some kind of letter from the government, or even worse, the tax authorities to say, you owe this. This happened to a friend of mine, and it was a huge sum. It's something he couldn't really afford at the time, and he hadn't planned for it appropriately. And it ended up that, you know, the extra work that he was doing for the second language academy, it just wasn't worth it at all, okay? And I experienced this myself. I accepted work, let's say 14 hours in one place, and then another place said to me, hey, we've got this 6 hours for you. I walked into the 6-hour place, and an old colleague that I knew, this is why networking, we'll come to that in a minute, is important. He said to me, wait, you're doing what? So you're only working here 6 hours? He said, you need to be really careful about these tax implications. You can get caught out bad. Anyway, went home, called a couple of friends, a couple of TEFL friends, asked them what they thought about it. And it turns out that I was making a terrible decision. I was going to cause myself a lot of headaches. So what did I do? I immediately quit the 6-hour job, and I just kept the 14-hour one. And I waited and waited and waited around. And what happened was the job that was offering me 14 hours ended up offering me more than 6 hours overtime anyway. And this is another thing, is, let's say it's a bonus one, is that when a language academy, or you get your first job and they say to you, hey, we'll give you 14 hours, the likelihood of that increasing is actually really high. So it might be 14 hours, but I wouldn't always take that at face value. It's very likely to go up. There's very much likely to be more opportunities for more work. So just be very careful of the red tape that surrounds kind of like hours, taking 2 jobs. Ideally, in an ideal world, you want that one contract that covers most of your work. All right? Okay, so moving on. Number 6, we plan lessons for you. Now, I wish I knew this before I started TEFL. When you go into a workplace and they say to you, oh, the best thing about working at this language academy or this school is that we plan all of your lessons for you. You don't have to do any of the planning. We just give you the lesson and you teach it. Okay. Now, what I found is, in my experience and talking to people around me, that when a company or a school says we plan the lessons for you, really it's just them justifying paying you less. So when one of the first schools I worked for, I was getting paid a measly, I think it was 12.5 euros, if I'm correct, 12.5 euros per hour, and I was teaching adults. And the reason they justified this was because they told me that I wouldn't need to plan any of my lessons, that I could grab a lesson, take it to it would take me 1 minute to read it through, and then I could teach it to the students. And this turned out to be total bullshit, okay? It wasn't lessons planned for you. Sure, they had this lesson plan, but guess what? The lesson plan was shite, okay? So what did I have to do? Sure, I had to, not only did I have to get paid 12.5 euros for this hour, but I also had to go there and plan for an hour to make sure the lesson wasn't total crap, okay? So this whole, we plan the lessons for you, be very careful if any school or academy is using this as justification to pay you less. What you really want is just, you know, it's much better to just have a place say, right, it's 18 euros per hour, but that includes the time it takes you to plan the lesson. That I just personally prefer that. And I will say that usually, no matter what school I've ever worked at, they'll always give you a course book or materials to work from. So you don't have to, like, you know, do things totally from scratch. They'll just give you a course book, say, oh, we want you to work through this, but, you know, you plan the lessons. But when they're saying we've done everything for you, I tend to get a little bit wary about that situation. So just look out for that when you first start. Number 7, magical lessons and games. You know, it's the most crazy thing. When you type in TEFL on YouTube or TEFL lesson demonstration, English class, okay, what I always find is there's always these like over the top, ridiculous lessons. Maybe they're always using some prop or some, they're doing some crazy role play scenario, whatever it is. I always just find that these lessons are unbelievably unrealistic, okay? They really don't portray what like a standard lesson will look like. So when we watch this, as we've just started TEFL, we're about to go into the workplace, or we're thinking about getting a TEFL, we have a look at what these teachers do, and the only examples we can find are these people doing really abstract, unusual lessons that take loads of creativity, that will take loads of planning. And it's really, for me, it was like really disheartening. I was like, I don't know, how am I going to do this? I mean, I teach 20 hours a week. How am I going to do 20 hours a week of these like crazy lessons with these crazy role plays? And I've got to be this and that and everything. And I've got to be an actor, and I've got to put on funny voices. I've got to wear a cape. I've got to bring in a special prop every lesson. I mean, it's just ridiculous. It's just not the reality of teaching English. So when you're going online and you're watching these videos where the teacher's just playing game after game after game after game, and everything's crazy and everyone's singing and everyone's dancing, it's not like that. Like, that's not the reality of it, okay? So like, and this we'll come on to this a bit in the next point, but like, not every lesson has to be some insanely creative masterpiece, okay? Like English lessons, you want to improve people's English. The aim is to progress their English, and it doesn't always take like this insane amount of originality in every lesson to accomplish that goal. And at the end of the day, that's the most important goal. So like a lot of my lessons, sure, I have the occasional, what I would call a wow lesson, okay? I have a lesson once a week or twice a week that I'll plan and say, I'll put a bit more effort into this. Let me make this a bit more fun than the usual. Sure, that's great. But the majority of my lessons, they're quite like well formatted, easily planned. Like not mundane, but certainly there's like, they can be a bit formulaic, okay? And that's okay. That's okay. Like, sure, we're entertainers, but I think really as an educator, if you're teaching English as a foreign language, the most important thing is that you just achieve the goal at the end of the day, and that's to help them speak English. And I think there's many routes to that, but YouTube for some reason only tends to show this like insane creativity route, and I don't buy it, okay? I don't buy it, and it's not the reality of what I've seen and how I've helped students learn. So there's that. And this actually comes on nicely to the 8th thing I wish I knew before I started TEFL. And I put here usefulness versus fun. And this, it really perfectly ties in. So fun. Again, some of those YouTube videos that we see, it's always about fun, craziness, laughing, dancing in the class, okay, whatever it is. And the truth is, students actually value things that are useful more than they value what is fun. Okay. Now, the adult students, they're very aware of the fact that they love usefulness more than fun. They're very aware of that. Okay. The teenagers, they think they like fun more. Okay. But actually, when you start teaching teenagers stuff that is really useful for them and they can see the value in what you're teaching them, actually, you'll see them as learners, they just switch. And as soon as they think it's useful, they're much more dedicated to it. They're much more likely to repeat that language and use it. Admittedly, though, with the young learners, the baptism of fire ones, usefulness, fun, maybe I go for a bit more fun. But in general, guys, when we're in TEFL, the most important thing about your lessons and when you start is that, can you make it useful? Is the student going to use this language again? Does the student understand why they might want to use this language again? Okay. If we can make our lessons useful, students are going to respect us as teachers, as educators, and that makes our job a lot easier. So always aim to be useful more than you aim to be fun. What I say is, everything in my lesson, it's all about being useful, and what I do is I sprinkle in a little bit of fun, okay? The fun is kind of like the seasoning, okay? But the usefulness, that's the meat and potatoes of a TEFL lesson. Important to remember that when you're starting out. We don't need magic lessons. We don't need crazy lessons. We need useful lessons, okay? All right, and the last one, and we're going to switch topics slightly here, and this is networking. And over my years as a TEFL teacher, and it's really important to know this as soon as you begin, as soon as you start training to become a TEFL teacher, networking is probably the most valuable resource you have for your future career prospects. from the very start of your teacher journey, when you get your first job, or even when you walk into your first language academy to try and get a job, you're going to be meeting people who are in the TEFL space, who are in the TEFL world. And I found that over the years of congregating this huge group of former colleagues, of people I've known in the business, it's amazing the opportunities that can arise just from knowing people in this space, okay? I found that loads of jobs go around by word of mouth first, okay? The job board sites are, in my opinion, total trash, okay? Like, getting TEFL work via a job board site is really unlikely, or at least it's just a small tiny bit of the ocean. It's a cup of the ocean, in my opinion. Most jobs, it's just about who you know, okay? It's about who you know, who you've spoken to. So whenever you're making your way around, if you go to a summer school, if you start a new job here, a new job there, get the details of the people working there. Get people on Instagram, okay? And I found as well, and I've kind of regretted not doing this more, okay? I've only really started doing this the last few years. I should have been doing it the last 8 or 9 years, okay? I should have been doing this. The amount of contacts I would have had easy access to. Hey, you're in Italy. Have you got a job in Italy? Do you know of a good academy? Okay? And, you know, there have been times where I've reached out to someone because I know they were in, let's say, Dubai. And I said, hey, I'm looking for a job in Dubai. Anything available at your school? And they say, hey, no, but I'll let you know when something comes up. And that person contacted me 7 months later saying, hey, we've got a job. Do you want to apply for it? I'll put in a good word for you. Like, it's unbelievable the things that happen. And not only that, because a lot of jobs are word of mouth, you'll find that you'll learn about opportunities that no one even knows about just through speaking with other TEFL teachers. So networking is a huge resource. Now, even in my own experiences, I've been offered jobs based purely just on networking rather than them interviewing me. Okay, it's just, oh, I know a teacher, he's good, let's give him the job. It's pretty much like a lot of my interviews that I've gone for in the last few years have just been like me sitting down with a person and just working out logistics. There's not even a question of if I've got the job, I've already got it. Okay, and it's because of this networking, it's because of reputation, it's because of who I've worked for, what they've said about me, these kind of things. So a huge resource in many different ways, and it's something I really encourage you to think about from day one of becoming a TEFL teacher. All right, so there we go. These are 9 things I wish I knew before starting TEFL. I hope you enjoyed that, guys. My name's Lewis. And basically, I'm your guy for all things TEFL. I plan to be posting regularly on this channel. It's going to be really informational, really useful for you. If you're currently a TEFL teacher, or if you're thinking about becoming a TEFL teacher, then really this is the channel for you. I just implore you please to subscribe. If you've got any questions, I'll reply to every single one, okay, in the comments. So, and also my first YouTube video. So yeah, salute.